The best and simplest analogy that I have for explaining Bitcoin mining is it's as if you had a cross between the military and Visa. So you get to use resources to process payments and take fees, but with those same resources, you are also effectively protecting the network. In the same way that the military is protecting trade channels, miners are protecting the network that passes all of the value on the Bitcoin network.
Welcome to Medium of Exchange, the podcast where we spotlight business owners building on a Bitcoin standard. Each week, we share real stories, practical insights, and why this monetary shift matters more than ever. Today's guest is someone who's helping usher in a new era of financial literacy and digital sovereignty, one person at a time. Beau Turner is the founder of Abundant Minds, where he's demystifying Bitcoin mining and wealth building in a world that feels, at times, increasingly rigged against the individual. Beau's not just handing people tools, he's teaching them how to use them with confidence. Through his educational content and his team providing one-on-one support for hosted mining, he's helping regular people make sense of this monetary revolution and actually participate in it. Especially in the mining space where confusion abounds, he is clear, direct, and trusted. He's also the host of the podcast Hosting Bitcoin, where he's interviewed brilliant minds like Jack Dorsey, Jeff Booth, Natalie Brunell, adding even more depth to the conversation that we're about to have. And today, we're digging into his personal journey, what he's building at Abundant Minds, why he believes Bitcoin isn't just an asset, it's a doorway to something better. Beau Turner, welcome to Medium of Exchange. It is really an honor to have you, my friend.
Jason, Jack, thank you guys for having me on, and thank you for a beautiful intro.
Yeah, man. So, Beau, take us back. Like, how did you discover Bitcoin, and what was the moment you realized you needed to build Abundant Minds?
So, like anything of note, it took quite a bit of exposure for me to kind of shift my full attention into it. It wasn't like I saw it for the first time and I completely understood what I was looking at and why it mattered to the world. My first exposure was in 2015. I was in college. It's just came across the plate as I was looking at other investments, frankly. And it was this weird thing that, I was young. I was looking for what the wealth building vehicle for me would be. And this funny thing called Bitcoin came around and I was like, this is really interesting. This isn't like a stock. This isn't like anything that I've ever seen before. But, it's already a couple billion market cap. Probably most of the gains are behind us. So I wish I had not had that view in 2015 and been a little bit more bought in. But I was lucky to get some, set up my $10 daily buy on Coinbase, which ended up being a good move years later. But it wasn't until 2020 and 2021 that I really fully turned my attention toward it. So I was in an engineering major, was looking at getting into the engineering space. I ended up just building a real estate company after school. And what I found was that none of these things, whether in the engineering world or in just the world of real estate development, really ignited that sense of kind of inspiration and purpose. And the more that I allowed myself to be subjected to Bitcoin podcasts and people like Saylor coming on and describing what this could be, it really just turned me toward the idea that I could work on something that was not only potentially very lucrative and a great place to be career-wise, but also extremely meaningful. And when I had first heard about mining, I thought, okay, interesting, like you run computers and it makes money, that's cool. And it took, hundreds, if not thousands of hours of additional education to realize, wow, this is actually potentially a vehicle to sort of save the environment and save the world and remake the way that we interact with energy, which was not even something that I conceptualized that we needed to remake or retool how we interacted with. So, suffice it to say, the deeper you go down the rabbit hole, the deeper the rabbit hole goes. And that has been my journey. And it started with just buying $10 a day and has turned into a company that takes, all my time, all my energy, and I could not be happier getting people into Bitcoin mining.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about before we get into like Bitcoin stuff. So you had, was it rental properties or what was the real estate side?
Yeah, exactly. So I had a rental property portfolio across the Southeast, started in my hometown of Birmingham, Alabama, had a few properties there. And then when I moved to Texas, started building a portfolio there, picked up a couple in Georgia as well, but really was just looking to build the passive income stream that most people are looking for as early as I could, understand what passive income was. And to me, real estate was that vehicle, or at least I thought it would be. And it never ended up actually being that passive for me. Seemed to take only more and more time the more successful it got. And at a certain point, it just no longer was something that I was passionate about. And I could see that it was a reliable wealth building vehicle, but um, did not, there's this saying that someone who's passionate about what they're doing is always going to be far better than you, even if you are putting significant amount of time and effort into something. And I realized that I would just continually, even though I was quite successful for a young guy, get out competed by someone who actually woke up absolutely loving the real estate game every day. And so at a certain point, I decided, you know what, all these single family homes, these light commercial buildings, like I love getting the check. I don't love property management. I don't love not being able to inspect what I'm expecting in terms of people taking care of properties that are several states away. And so 2020 started the process of liquidating that real estate portfolio that been building, and sold my last property at the beginning of 2024. That's one benefit
Wow.
of Bitcoin is if I had made that decision, I could have been done with it pretty much overnight, to liquidate all my
It,
Bitcoin. But property takes a couple of years.
it's incredible how illiquid. I've learned that over the last few years, how illiquid real estate can be. It's interesting because I have a very similar um, journey to an extent where, in addition to the impact that Bitcoin can have on the world, like the incredible like need for Bitcoin that I believe that the world has, just purely from a selfish, just wealth building, tool, how you can with a single click build wealth with where you DCA and that's it. Like all the even when I shifted for me, I shifted from my real estate journey is I spent 10 years managing my properties myself. I had some in Tennessee and Washington State. And even when I got burnt out, that passion dried up and I shifted over to property management, everything's managed by someone else. We still have like multiple QuickBooks company files. The bookkeeper's still asking questions. The property manager's still asking questions about painting the exterior of this house and the plumbing question for this other one. And I was like, man, Bitcoin fixes this. Like,
Yeah, totally.
so okay, so was it so you had real estate as a way to store your time and energy. What were some of your like experiences or frustrations that really was the tipping point that pushed you from that traditional real estate wealth building playbook and explore something like Bitcoin mining?
So it was a mix of conceptual learning and just lived experience. So on the experience side, you have enough really expensive tenant turnovers, and you're gonna start to dislike the process of having tenants and having to turn them over and find new ones. And I had one in particular that just wiped out several years of rental income, even though the house had no debt on it. So think like most people are renting homes on very thin margins. They're servicing a mortgage. They're hoping to make pretty nominal cash flow on a home. And I did not have any debt on this place, and so it was 100% free cash flow. And this person just absolutely wrecked the place, and it was such a raw experience of feeling like effort and time had been wasted on that was really the first property go. So as soon as that experience happened, I was like, you know what, this isn't the right area, maybe this isn't the right home. So I'm going to just go ahead and liquidate this one. And then around that time as well, I was beginning to realize that even if I was responsible and had no debt on my properties, that the entire real estate market is essentially backed by a considerable amount of debt. So even if you are a responsible actor in the market, everybody else carrying a ton of debt on their property can have a huge impact on the value of your property, because if things like 2008 happen and suddenly there's no new credit, there's no new lending, and you see a contraction in the amount of debt that people are willing to give out for real estate, then every bit of real estate is going to lose value in nominal terms, and that's a crappy place to be. So I was really interested in the fact that Bitcoin was totally uncorrelated, that it was essentially backed by pure energy rather than as much debt as you can pump into it. It was notoriously a bad thing to take out debt and buy at the time, super volatile. And so not a great idea to be leveraged to the hilt. We've seen plenty of people blow up if they do that in a really unintelligent way. So that was part of it. But the next step you would think would just be, okay, sell all my properties and just buy Bitcoin. But I really loved getting cash flow. Like, absolutely loved the sense of just waking up and something is coming to me without me having to lift a finger, or minimally lift a finger. And I didn't want to trade that. And I had already seen the blow ups happen time and time again with people choosing to get passive income by lending out their Bitcoin. So I think there's a few products nowadays that maybe are a little bit safer, a little bit easier to monitor on chain, that aren't rehypothecated. But I felt that the most true, pure native way that I could get passive income in the Bitcoin space was to actually get into mining. And started by just getting miners and hosting them with someone. I had a really raw experience that was about a year of just nightmarish working with the wrong partner and having delays in deployment and broken things and extra bills for repair that I wasn't expecting. And I thought, man, like, I had plenty of data center coursework, and Bitcoin mines are not even that complicated necessarily of data centers. So, like, let's go try this and build a facility myself. And I was lucky to be surrounded by the right people at the right time, that here in Oregon were in the space for a super long time, and we're just looking for the right people to work with to actually build something of meaning. And originally I was just intending to build and mine quietly and not have anybody know about it, and not have a podcast or go on podcasts or anything like that. But I've heard that your purpose lies next to the worst thing that ever happened to you. And that mining experience, especially because of the timing,
Mm.
and me having just gotten engaged and suddenly being fearful of my future, was at the time the worst thing that had ever happened to me, at least in a business sense. And so I thought, you know what? We can offer this service. We can actually help people get into mining, and I can make sure that the people that are looking to get into mining have the experience that I wish that I'd had when I first got in. So, to make a long story short, um, got into mining because it seemed like the best way to make more Bitcoin and do it passively, and it turned into so much more.
So, and then you started Abundant Minds. Um, what was that like for you guys? Well, was it just you, and like, tell me more there.
Yeah, it started with just me and our lead engineer, Colin. Colin's been mining himself since about 2012. Um, he never turned it into anything super commercial, like had a small facility, which was where I started out, having a few machines hosted, and our very first clients were hosted, and our first large scale facilities in that same town. So that early space that he had was kind of like the nucleus, the seed that gave us the jumping off point to go out and build the larger space. And he just was mining for years and years here, and always had a group of people around him. He calls it the guild. The joke being that it was kind of like herding cats, but a bunch of cats that were enjoying mining. So it was never really a commercial enterprise, more like a co-op of people who just wanted to mine together. But you would have to come if you were one of these cats in the guild and manage your stuff yourself. It was not a done for you service. If you were non-technical, it was not something to get involved in. And so, I needed someone who truly loved the managing computers and maintenance and electrical and facilities and all of that on a day-to-day basis, who genuinely is passionate about that and he needed someone who could communicate and provide an experience and work on essentially spreading the word, spreading the mission. And I was of course the capital partner from liquidating real estate, and he was basically the backbone of the operation. And for the first year of development, it was just us two. And now we're sitting with a team of, I think the last count is 16 or 17 people, and it seems like we get a new person about every few weeks.
That's
You did
that's
not.
great. No, that's great. I
Uh,
mean, that's awesome seeing that kind of journey come to where you are now with a team of that large. I'm interested in hearing about the name, right? Abundant Energy, or Abundant Mining rather, and Bitcoin's scarce. Like that's one of the things that gets people to understand Bitcoin. So in a sense, it's almost like that's a paradox. How can something that is perfectly scarce be abundant?
That's a great question. I'll say that the name came from, I've always loved having an aspirational name for a business. So my real estate company was called Good Life Realty, and at the time that was the highest vision of what I thought a life could be, was a good life. And after years and years of that being the highest vision that I could imagine for myself, I thought, you know what, good is kind of a limiting word. There's probably a better, higher frequency aspirational word that I could align with. And I can't say that it was a linear decision to use the word abundance, but I can tell you that over and over, that word came back as the highest expression of what Bitcoin meant to me and what I thought it meant to the world, is ushering in a world of abundance. And despite mining being what seems like the most cutthroat business on earth, and a ever increasing group of people and resources going after a finite supply of something, every time I met with somebody or worked with somebody in the mining space, or even just connected with the community, it always felt like there was an abundance attitude. It didn't feel like a bunch of dogs going after a single piece of meat and having to fight over it. It was like everybody's willing to help each other. So despite it being this quote finite game going after the last remaining Bitcoin, of which there's only about 5% of the supply left to mine, it always felt like going after abundance together, and not only going after it, but actually creating it. And that every new resource that we put into mining more coin, we were actually bootstrapping an abundant future in everything else. So hope that explains it. I just think that mining is one of the keys to us building the most abundant future possible for humans.
Why is that? Is your business accepting a form of payment that stores value over time? A recent survey showed the number one challenge that small business owners are facing today is inflation. You raise prices, renegotiate with vendors, try to stay ahead, but your dollars keep losing purchasing power. At the Bitcoin Payments Advisor, we help business owners like you accept Bitcoin, a form of money that's built to resist inflation. Unlike dollars, Bitcoin has a fixed supply. And that means the value that you receive today has the potential to hold or grow over time, not quietly erode. Our service makes it simple. No servers and tech headaches, just easy setup, white glove support, integration with your existing systems. If you're ready to explore a smarter way to get paid, one that helps you fight inflation instead of fall behind, visit bitcoinpaymentsadvisor.com. Again, that's bitcoinpaymentsadvisor.com. Tell me more.
It all comes back to energy. And I wouldn't have ever probably learned this had I not gotten into mining. But energy is our foundational commodity. It's the backbone of how we all navigate the world. If we suddenly had less access to energy, it would be very apparent how much we all rely on it to get the very basic service and quality of life that we all depend on. And until I was in mining, I didn't recognize that. I didn't see that. I didn't understand how fundamental it was. And what I realized was miners are the most natural seekers of, and in a sense, the most well defined incentive structure to develop abundant energy. And before mining, there was no such thing as a, a insensitive, infinite consumer of energy that would buy regardless of where it is or how much it is, as long as it's at the right price. There's no such thing as infinite demand for energy. And in my opinion, it's part of why energy innovation hasn't progressed faster than it has. So to me, the more mining exists, the more incentive there is to create abundant energy. The more abundant energy there is, the more prosperous civilization on the whole is. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the Kardashev scale ranks civilizations by how much energy they use or how much energy they can channel. And essentially, I've always been a sci-fi nerd. Like I can't wait for us to live in the Star Wars future of intergalactic travel, and all of that is connected to energy use and really efficient channeling of energy. And funny enough, I think Bitcoin mining is the most natural way to bring that about in a sly roundabout way.
So there's a correlation between abundant energy and human flourishing. And
Couldn't have summed it up better myself.
yeah. Yeah, and so for you it's like it ties into the title of your company and abundance. What is this is maybe a rudimentary question, but just for our listeners who maybe are not necessarily into Bitcoin, or maybe they are and they don't necessarily know about the mining side. Can you just like give us a really quick snippet of like what even is mining?
Of course. It's just the process of taking raw energy, running it through a computer that's doing work with it, and using that computer, the output of that computer, to secure a network. And there's so many different ways that I could explain it. The best and simplest analogy that I have for explaining Bitcoin mining is it's as if you had a cross between the military and Visa. So you get to use resources to process payments and take fees, but with those same resources, you are also effectively protecting the network. In the same way that the military is protecting trade channels, miners are protecting the network that passes all of the value on the Bitcoin network. And so that's the most simplistic way that I could describe it. And the way that that happens in a mechanical sense is you run energy through a computer that's guessing a ridiculous amount of random numbers on a second by second basis. And that randomness creates that security and also the perfect end puzzle piece to add every new block to the ledger that forms the history of all the transactions that we see on the Bitcoin network.
That was a great synopsis. So military and Visa. That like really like resonated with me for a second. So military as in protection of the network, Visa as in the network itself. Does that sound right?
Exactly. I mean, if you think about it, the military is not earning fees in a direct sense. I mean, it's quite a cost center, but they're not directly taking fees for protecting trade routes or protecting other types of monetary networks. But we do. As miners, we're directly taking transaction fees from every block that gets mined. And Visa doesn't, they're not a cybersecurity company per se. They're not necessarily putting a lot of their resources into protecting something. It's more just about facilitating value transfer. So if you just describe it as a payments network, you're also missing what I would say is half of it, which is this is a digital network storing more value than any other in the world with no central passwords. So how do you keep it safe? And the way that it's kept safe is just ever increasing randomness thrown into the void with raw energy that's used around the world.
Medium of Exchange is sponsored by Polaris Payments. Let's face it, for now, businesses still need to accept fiat and credit cards. Polaris Payments helps with all your credit card processing needs using a consultative approach. Think of Polaris like a performance coach, helping take your business to the next level when it comes to accepting all forms of money. For more information about Polaris Payments, visit polarispayments.com. Now let's get back to the show. Jack, I'm going to let you ask the next one.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting talking to a mining guy and an energy guy on like this premise of getting new people into Bitcoin, because I find my conversations with non-Bitcoiners or people who are like curious about Bitcoin, they'll ask me what is Bitcoin, and I'll give them, the kind of high level overview. It's, digital cash, peer to peer, scarce, all that type of stuff. But then they always ask the follow up question of what is mining? And they're like, how does mining work into the network? And I almost struggle with this because I'm like, mining is such a rabbit hole in itself that I don't know how deep to go, because it's like I don't want to overwhelm them with the amount of information that goes into mining. And I think that's where your analogy that you just used is pretty powerful. But I am curious, when you're talking to somebody, whether it's a potential client or just a friend that you're looking to orange pill, what is that conversation of getting them to start to learn more about mining and bringing it into the network as a whole? Because that often to me feels like the biggest unlock for people when they realize that Bitcoin isn't just a store of value, but it is this monetary network that's being supported by millions of miners around the world.
Oh man. You've got it right. It can be really overwhelming to get people to want to learn about mining, because if Bitcoin is a niche within the financial system, then mining is a niche within that niche, and it's even more. It's got even more technical jargon to navigate that can be really tough for people. That said, um, a couple things. I've been really surprised by how many people work with us and we are their first exposure to Bitcoin in general. Like, they've never set up a wallet before and they're coming to start mining with us. So just by that being part of the nature of our business, we've had to get pretty good at onboarding people and helping them understand. But I think the really special thing about getting into mining is, especially in the older demographic, the hardest thing for people to wrap their minds around Bitcoin having value is the fact that it's non-physical. They can't lay their hands on it. It's very difficult for them to form a relationship with it in the same way that they would, a gold coin or a piece of real estate or shares in a company, where at least there's this physical world connection that they can analogize. And it's part of the reason I use analogies often, is because unless we can connect something new to something that we are familiar with, it's really hard to build intuition and familiarity and like really believe in something. Before then, it's just a sense of faith. But what's really cool about mining is that it is that physical thing that the Bitcoin network. It's the only physical manifestation of the Bitcoin network in reality. And so, despite it being overly technical and really tough to distill into just a couple sentences of what is Bitcoin mining, if you can get someone to physically come out to see a Bitcoin mining facility and see a miner running, that experience is often more powerful than the best framed education that you can give someone, even one to one, answering every question perfectly. There's something very visceral about driving past a hydropower dam, seeing a data center set up next to a substation, and then seeing hundreds or thousands of computers lined up. And then you have to wonder, okay, someone went to the trouble of setting up all of this physical infrastructure. Why? Oh, to secure this thing that they're saying has value. And oh, by the way, this facility that I'm touring is one of thousands around the world and is not even that big of a facility compared to the ones. So, okay, this isn't just a non-physical, like, nerdy magic internet money thing. This is secured by real resources that, I mean, they could be used for something else, but why are they choosing to do this? And then you dive into the the rabbit hole of, oh wait, there's so much wasted energy, and they're actually going and finding that waste and monetizing it. So that wasn't a shallow dive into the rabbit hole, but like the fact that you can physically touch this part of the network, I find unlocks something very different than even the best explanations that I give people. So that would be the answer of like, how do you get someone down the rabbit hole? God, man, if they'll just get a plane ticket and come out and see us in Oregon, I promise you it's an experience. And it's part of why we make every team member that we can come out and actually see the facility, even if they have nothing to do with mining, even if they're just in billing or customer service, or like, seeing the facility is a completely different experience than trying to learn a concept online.
That's great.
I still want to come out. I know you invited me out. I'm not going to be able to make it, unfortunately. In when was it? Like August, I think. um, I spent 13 years in the Pacific Northwest. You're based in Oregon. I was in Seattle. Seattle's not necessarily known for like the density of like conservatives. The narrative very much was Bitcoin bad, specifically Bitcoin bad for the environment. You've made clear decisions to like prioritize sustainability, environmental stewardship. Can you fill us in on like, you mentioned wasted energy, and the stewardship of the environment, kind of countering this narrative that's so prevalent, especially in urban areas like Seattle. Like what's the truth? What's the reality of it all?
Yeah, one of the things that I love more than anything about the Bitcoin network, and specifically about mining, is that, and I've always loved these things just throughout my life, is something that is very aggressively opposed and poorly misunderstood. And Bitcoin mining is one of those things where you'll usually find negative opinions about it. And I think that those negative opinions are extremely misplaced, and in fact completely the opposite of being a strain on the environment or a waste of resources. It's one of the most powerful tools that we have for using our resources more wisely and actually cleaning up a lot of the waste and pollution that happens across our energy systems. So in our case, our very first facility was placed on the Columbia River in a town where they had essentially extra electrical capacity that was just going to waste. And if you aren't familiar with the seasonal variations of hydropower, there are months at a time where hydropower gets effectively just thrown over the dam and never run through a turbine, because there's a ton of energy that nobody actually needs, because it's perfect weather here for a significant portion of the year. And most energy goes to some sort of heating and cooling. So they'll just let energy flow over these dams. And if you think about it, it costs money to build and maintain these structures. It's kind of like having a commercial office building that can hold 100 people and only having 10 or 20 in that building at any given time. What happens is there's still common area maintenance and just fixed overhead that needs to be taken care of. And in most commercial leases, you're paying a portion of common area maintenance. And if it's 10 people splitting what 100 people should be paying for, it's going to be more expensive for every individual person. So it's not that dissimilar in the energy world, where every utility, regardless of how big or small, has fixed costs that they need to be able to overcome, and that comes from ratepayers. So if you have 10 megawatts available, but you only have a group of people using one, then effectively you've got a ton of fixed costs that aren't being levelized or spread out among enough energy users, and everybody's energy is more expensive because of that. So we came in, we just used capacity that was already there, effectively doubled utility revenue, and that has brought a whole new economic base to a town that's effectively been shrinking for the last 20 years. And that's been a huge impact on the community. And we get to use sustainable resources in a beautiful climate and bring a little bit of joy and new activity to a town that's lost most of its industry over the last few decades. And just to piggyback on that, that's like pilot project. That's site number one. We're looking at different ways that we can monetize landfill gas and actually clean up methane that otherwise would be vented into the atmosphere in the Northwest. There's several projects near our existing sites where we can actually tap into energy resources that they can't even sell onto the grid and that otherwise would just be pollutants. We're
I'm
setting up
I'm pumped for
greenhouses at
that.
our Eugene site. Yeah,
I
I
want to get
mean,
some miners
it's
there.
like
You're in the
they
recycling
might have a
business.
little bit. Basically, I mean, it's truly the trash to treasure analogy. Is you're literally turning the stuff that people throw away into the world's base commodity and then into the world's
It's
best money. Um,
it's literally illegal to put something that could go in the recycle bin into the trash bin in Seattle, and you're basically uh, like you're countering this narrative like Bitcoin's bad for the environment. You're like flipping it completely upside down on its head, and you're basically saying no, like we are in the business of recycling. It's not that it should be illegal to not mine Bitcoin, but it's a very helpful thing to be doing what you're doing.
it counters
Well,
the it shouldn't use so much energy narrative like to its core. And if you place it in these situations, the more energy you use, the better, and the better for everybody. And then not only that, but on the downstream end of that, like half of all the world's energy is used for heat. So miners, like coincidentally, exhaust all of the energy that they use as heat. I mean, it's 99% efficient in terms of converting energy to heat. It's not like you lose any of it when it's actually running through a computer. So on the back end of our Eugene site, we're hooking it up to greenhouses so that throughout the winter you can actually grow food and provide a little bit more food security to communities that don't necessarily have an ability to get fresh food through the winter. So it's this very cool, like, holistic thing that just a few nerds running computers doesn't seem like it could have that sort of impact, but um, placed in the right situations with the right intention, it absolutely can.
I'm starting to understand the name Abundant Minds. That's incredible, and that one of the things that I love talking most about mining and the mining industry is how creative, because how creative we get in terms of that reuse or that recycling. Because you mentioned it before, like at its core, mining is a pretty cutthroat business. Like you are trying to get the cheapest access to the most amount of energy to ultimately mine Bitcoin, but the doors that opens. I mean, and especially from the demand response side, from what you're doing with that hydro dam. I saw a statistic earlier today that in the state of Texas, I believe it's about 50% of ERCOT's expenditures come in just 14% of the year. So about 1,200 hours uses up 50% of a year's like supply of energy. So
Hmm.
what's great about Bitcoin mining is you can really flatten that variance for these huge operators. And then you start to see use cases coming in, which you described of a shrinking town now becomes a town that's actually on the uprise because you have cheaper cost of living and you have a probably better experience living because you're able to provide better quality services and goods. So I just this is why the mining is a whole nother rabbit hole in itself, because I love hearing those types of projects that are coming on to the scene.
Yeah. The analogy I like to use, and it plays to exactly what you described in ERCOT, is that we're performing grid scale acupuncture. And the reason I like to use that analogy is it's a very small pinprick in terms of the amount of energy that we're using or not using, but placed in the right channel, it frees up exactly the resources needed to bring more balance and flow to the entire system. And it can be, like you said, a very small portion of time and a very small block of energy that placed in the right sequence, the right time of year, makes a huge difference. And even in the Northwest, the statistic is about 1% of the hours of the year are 10 to 15% of the costs. And if we can be offline for that 1% of the year, our clients are at a 95% service level. So they still got 4% to spare. and they're totally fine with it. It gets them cheaper costs. It gets everybody in our communities cheaper costs. And we get to have this really holistic impact on what I believe is the most important, the most foundational system to us living an abundant future. And it's endlessly fun. I mean, I was jaded coming out of an engineering degree thinking engineering is the most like just hard, maybe not boring, but like just absolute grind cognitively to go out and solve complex problems in the world. And Bitcoin mining makes the entire world seem like a very fun engineering problem of how can we better use the resources around us with a built-in incentive structure for getting rewarded for having that creativity and that engineering mindset. So I didn't think that I wanted to be an engineer, but turns out it's actually really fun. And if you have the right vehicle and the right network to support, that can be extremely rewarding.
I wanna shift gears a little bit, if that's okay, guys, because I want to get into something before we wrap up. Beau, you helped facilitate one of the many dots, interconnected dots for me. I have a background in addition to real estate, a background in payments. We titled this show "Medium of Exchange." We talked a little bit about this at the conference in Vegas, and I listened before I ever, knew you. I listened to your podcast with Jack Dorsey, and that's one of the things that you guys talked about. And mining is thought of sort of this like back end infrastructure thing, but in many ways, it's like what makes spending Bitcoin even possible. My mom is always like, Jason, you don't plan to ever sell your Bitcoin. Like, why would I buy Bitcoin? I want to be able to sell it and use it, right? And so in a way, Bitcoin mining, though, it makes Bitcoin spending possible. So how do you connect the dots between like mining and using Bitcoin in the real world? And I kind of want to talk a little bit for a second about, real world use cases rather than just number go up and mining.
Yeah, well, the first thing I'll say to that is we run a business, and I love more than anything taking payment in Bitcoin. It's so much easier. It's so much faster. It settles basically immediately. I don't have to justify receiving a Bitcoin payment. And so, in terms of just running a business, when people pay for machines or pay for hosting in Bitcoin, I'm super happy about it. I love working with the best money in the world, and we encourage people to do it by offering discounts for doing so. So, people that pay with Bitcoin on their invoices are getting a 3% discount because not only is it easier, faster, cheaper to use, it saves us on transaction fees. We talked about Visa earlier in the podcast. You can totally avoid the 3% on Visa and instead pay the network fee, which is quite nominal compared to 3% charge on your credit card. And then when it comes to actual use, once you've mined your sats, you can do with them what you please. And I think commerce really is the most natural vehicle for us to learn how to use something and have an incentive to use something. And in a way, I'm not sure if this really answers your question. Like getting a Bitcoin miner, even if it's a hosted miner, is kind of the most pure form of a Bitcoin business where you're taking inputs and getting an output and expecting to make a profit. And so to me, at least, it's this really beautiful cycle or system that you can get someone involved in with relatively low overhead if they've got the right partner that gets them a Bitcoin native, not just like buy it, hold it, put it somewhere and don't look at it for 10 years, but actually a stream of flowing Satoshis that they then have agency to choose to do something with. And just by the nature of it being a business rather than a savings account, there's a little bit more of a sense of being active in it, even if it is totally managed for you. And, many of our clients aren't necessarily coming out and rigging computers up or doing repairs themselves, but even still, it is technically an active business in the sense that you're putting something in and getting something out on a recurring basis. And it also connects them to that actual processing of transactions. So you know, it's core infrastructure, and by being a part of core infrastructure, you get a much deeper sense of, one, how does this network work? Why am I getting paid this money to do this? Like, where is this energy actually going? And then every time a block confirms, the transaction fees, you're getting a little piece of that just by being involved in the network. And so whether you're spending your Bitcoin, sending your Bitcoin somewhere, you are actually facilitating the fact that this is not just a store value network, but a medium of exchange network. Does that answer your question?
I mean, I didn't have a very articulate question, but yeah. Um, like, because Jack Dorsey, was very explicit, right? Like, he's like, we have to get to the medium of exchange era. And so I'm always curious to like hear from people who are running a real business, who are really accepting Bitcoin. It's like, well, it's $2 trillion store of value, but nobody accepts Bitcoin. Well, no, like Beau accepts Bitcoin every day, right? And so I guess the answer to my mom is like, well, no, you can spend it. When do you think that we will be in an era where every day, not just Bitcoin miners, but something that's not Bitcoin themed, that we'll be able to buy stuff with Bitcoin?
I think you can make the choice to do it today. And the quote that I will call on here is, the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And so there's people in my company who have not touched the fiat system in years and have lived on a Bitcoin standard and paid for everything on a Bitcoin standard, and go to their local farmers market and pay in Bitcoin. They've got their Bitcoin debit card where they effectively have no exposure to the dollar system whatsoever, and they live in a sea of people who have no exposure to the Bitcoin system whatsoever. So in any group of a million people, you've got a few of these pioneers who are effectively living in the future and doing exactly what you're describing. And what we're really wanting to get toward is just a critical mass of those people, such that it's not this like weird one-off thing, but like a community of people that exist, that live in this way, such that it's normalized. So when, hard to answer. When will a majority of people live this way? Hard to answer. All I can say is that there are people doing it now, and that it's more by the day. And the more tools that we build and the more infrastructure we build for that to be a common thing, the easier it becomes, the more you get not just the intrepid pioneers, but you get the early adopters, and then you get the early majority. And it's a gradually, and then suddenly, first it was a strange thing to go out and spend your Bitcoin, and then it's a strange thing to use an archaic payment system at some point in that line. So I can't tell you when that kind of psychological shift happens, but I would say easily within our lifetimes, but maybe within just a few years.
And I love how you used the term pioneer there, because I was actually having a conversation last week with a fellow Bitcoiner, and he was talking about the idea of reframing what we've often referred to ourselves as plebs. And when you think about it, pleb it's turned into a compliment in the Bitcoin space, but from a historical context, it's more of like a commoner, right? Like, you kind of look down upon plebs, and that's why Bitcoin being this, this kind of act of revolt, or a silent vote against the system, it's like a badge of honor. But in reality, with all of the innovation and advancements that the Bitcoin industry has taken in the last 16 years, but even really in the last 5 years, it is a pioneering movement. It is showing that you can live outside the system in a way where your purchasing power increases over time versus decreasing, and taking on these risks of playing with this magic internet money where just time and time again you're proven right. And I guess that, looking at it through that lens, like, what does the next 5 or 10 years look like for you? What are you trying to build? What do you hope to look back on this conversation right now and say, yeah, this is where my focus was, and I'm happy that it's where I decided to put that attention?
Well, one, I love you reframing the word pleb to pioneer, because I do think that the language that we use is super important, and that it does need to evolve in that sense. And I'll joke with people. I love calling my fellow Bitcoin meetup attendees psychopaths, but in the future I will probably refer to them as my co-visionaries, because that's a way more positive way of looking at these people. But it can often seem the same to be just absolutely nutty about something that people don't understand. But if you're proven right, then suddenly you become a visionary, and that can only be seen in the course of time. Um, as far as the impact that I want to have and that I want this business to have, one, I want to onboard as many people as possible to Bitcoin, and the vehicle that we're doing that with effectively right now is Bitcoin mining. And I've been very pleasantly surprised that we are often the very first exposure for people. So, going to continue educating, going to continue spreading the word to people who are not already in the space. I already make very intentional efforts to speak to people who are not in Bitcoin already, because I think that we all already kind of get it. There's a community of people that once you're sort of brought into the fold, it's really easy to stay into it. But there's got to be those people on the outside bounds of space to pull people into the gravity well. And so, to the degree that I can move people's hearts a little bit closer to the Bitcoin space and get them that first exposure, my mission is accomplished. And in terms of the business itself, I really do think that we have the ability to transform energy systems, and by extension transform the prosperity and abundance that people experience on a daily basis. And right now we're focused on the Pacific Northwest, because I think if we were to focus too broadly, or sort of distribute across too wide of a landscape, we wouldn't be able to have the same kind of really laser-like impact. And so we are laser focused on the Pacific Northwest right now. But ultimately, this is the technology and the industry that I think will bring energy abundance to the world. So I won't limit us to the Pacific Northwest forever, but for now, laser like focus to make sure that the Northwest is abundant, prosperous, bright orange, and growing a lot of miner heated food.
I love it. Beau, I know we need to wrap up, but where can people go to find more about Abundant Minds and what you're up to?
Easiest way to find us would be our website. That's abundantminds.com. You can also find us on YouTube and all of the socials with the handle @abundantminds. YouTube would be the easiest place to get the most content possible. You've got long form videos, short form videos. All of our podcasts are on YouTube. We do our best to make all of the best information that we have free and accessible to anybody. So if you're looking to learn more, I would say that YouTube is the easiest place. But would love to have you reach out on any of the social networks. Someone from our team would be happy to assist you on your Bitcoin journey, and make sure that if you're looking at getting into mining, that you get in with the best company in the world.
Yeah, and just quick shout out. I got set up with some miners from Beau. It couldn't have gone better. His team was amazing. I like, it was like sharing with some friends some screenshots, because the chart just went right from flat line to just right up, and I was like, wow, it's working. Like the miners are on. It's happening. So, yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Beau. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Beau.
And
This
thank
is
you
awesome.
guys. This has been a blast, and appreciate what you're doing for the space.
Thank you.